What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next I'm going to be talking about the top 10 Fantastic Four keys and which ones you should be picking up right now. Alright, before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Now, if you watched the video I did a couple weeks ago with Bry's Comics, we talked about undervalued Fantastic Four keys. And to come up with the keys that I recommended, I did an analysis of 33 different Fantastic Four keys from the Silver Age and just a little bit into the Bronze Age. Now, I'm not going to go over all 33 because that video would be just way too long. So what I'm doing is I'm going to talk about the top 10 keys from the Silver Age, and this is the most important books, not necessarily the most valuable books, but they do tend to appear in there, just not necessarily in that order. Now at the end of this, I'm also going to talk about the ones that I think are the most undervalued in that top 10 and the ones that you should be looking to pick up right now. And I think there are some that might surprise you. So over these last couple of weeks, though, there has been a little bit of a wrinkle thrown into the comic market. So I did these numbers a couple weeks ago, and I did go back and review them and update things a little bit because, like I mentioned in my last market video, the comic market has softened a little bit since May. May seemed like it was kind of the peak, and we've seen a little bit of retraction in prices since then. So there are some things to consider with that when you're looking at these books. Now, if you haven't watched my Amazing Spider-Man and X-Men videos that I did with the top 10 books with those, I recommend going back and checking those out. If I remember, I'll throw links for those into the description. So if you saw those, what I've done is I look at the prices for each of these books and also the price that they were a year ago. So then I'm looking at how much they have increased in value over the last year to try to compare them against one another to see which ones maybe haven't moved quite as much and are the ones that you should be looking at to try and pick up. Now, you can't compare these books directly against one another grade for grade because they cover multiple years across the Silver Age. So, like the other list that I did, I looked at the most common book in that grade. So the book that has been graded the most by CGC. So, for example, with Fantastic Four #1, the most common grade is a 3.0, and so that's the grade that I used for this comparison with sales right now versus sales a year ago. Now, I'm not going to cover any of the annuals in this list. We talked about a lot of the annuals in that video I did with Bry's Comics, and so I'm not going to include those in this list. If you'd like to see those, go back and check out the video that I did with Brian a couple weeks ago because we definitely covered those books there. Like I've said with my other lists, this is definitely subjective. If you have any other feelings on the subject about what other books maybe should have been in that list, feel free to put those in the comments. I love talking to people in the comments, so feel free to add those there. Now, I'm going to present the books in the order of the ones that I think are the most important first, so I'm going to start with #1. Now, I don't think there's going to be very much question about what #1 on this list is going to be, and that is Fantastic Four #1. And it's the first appearance of the Fantastic Four of the first family: Mr. Fantastic, Sue Storm, The Thing, and Johnny Storm, or the Human Torch. And like I mentioned just a few seconds ago, the most common grade is a 3.0. And there are 216 blue labels on the CGC census, universal copies on the CGC census in a 3.0, with the total census being 2,553, with 1,706 of those being blue labels. So if you're not familiar with blue labels, that just means that it is an unrestored book. It's a book that hasn't been signed, restored, qualified, anything. It's just the book, the way it came from the publisher. And this book has less copies available than most of the other Silver Age big keys. So that is important. That's something I think is important to note here. And the price in May of 2020 was about $9,000 for this book. The current price, $16,000. And there have been sales of $16,100 on May 10th and $15,100 on April 4th. So right about that range. That's a price increase of 80%. And if you've watched my other videos, you know that is pretty low compared to Amazing Spider-Man and X-Men. The next book, #2, I also don't think there's going to be too much argument about this. I've got Fantastic Four #5. And this is the first appearance of Doctor Doom, just one of the biggest Marvel villains of all time. And the most common grade for this book is a 4.0, and there are 170 copies on the census in a 4.0, with the total census being just 1,830 copies, with 1,424 being blue labels. So it's pretty low count for a book that is that popular. Now, the price in May of 2020 was just $4,500. The current price, $15,000. Now, there haven't been any sales in this grade since December, at least that I could find recently, but a 4.5 sold on May 31st for $16,800, and a 5.0 sold on May 1st for $21,000. So, I mean, huge jumps in that book. It's a price increase of 235%. And that is just an incredible number for a book that's that expensive. Just a huge jump for a book that is already so expensive to start from a year ago. I mean, Fantastic Four number 5 is almost in a league of its own compared to other books, along with maybe X-Men number 1 and Giant Size X-Men number 1, with really expensive books and how much they've increased in the last year. Now, number 3, we've got Fantastic Four number 48. And this is the first appearance of Silver Surfer, the first cameo appearance of Galactus, so a huge key, a double key with this book. And the most common grade is a 4.5 with 525 blue labels. And this is a much later book. I mean, it's quite a few years, I think about 4 years after, and so there are a lot more copies out there. And the total census is 7,238 with 6,007 blue labels. So there are quite a few more copies than when you're talking about FF1 or FF5. And the price in May of 2020, just $1,100. The current price, $3,100 for a 4.5. So that's a price increase of 180%. So a huge increase. Now, I did mention earlier that there's been some softening in the market, so I want to make sure I point that out, that this book has had such a huge run-up that recently it's been contracting about 15%. That's where I'm seeing it from those highs in May. So I think the likely price is closer to around $2,700 right now, but that is still a big jump for this book. And that's one of those things I keep kind of repeating, is that even if you see some price declines, a price decline of 15 or 20%, that book is up almost 200% already. So it is still up a ton, even with that retraction in the price. Now, one other thing to note is that Heritage had their signature auction this weekend, and a 9.8 of Fantastic Four 48 sold for, I think it was $108,000. And so those types of big sales can have impacts on these books. And so it's possible that that could get that book out of that little kind of funk that it's been in, the retraction that it's been in, and get that price to start climbing again. So just something to watch, because there was that really big sale just a few days ago. Now, number 4, I've got Fantastic Four number 52. This is the first appearance of the Black Panther, and it just continues to be one of the most in-demand books out there entirely. And the most common grade is a 6.5, which is actually a pretty high grade. And there are 465 blue labels on the census in that grade. Total census is 5,250 with 4,412 blue labels. And the price in May of 2020 was just $825 for that 6.5. And if I could go back and pick that book up, I would love to, because the price today is $2,280. A 6.5 sold for that exact price on May 24th. On June 9th, one sold for $2,257, and a 7.0 sold for $2,600 on June 8th. So, I mean, that's where this book is selling right now, and it really hasn't retracted. This book has continued to stay strong. That's a price increase of 175%, so a big, big jump for that book. And so Black Panther, clearly still very popular, and we'll see what happens with that character with Disney. I have no idea what they're going to do. I don't know if they're going to ultimately recast the character, even though they said they won't, but we'll definitely have to see how they handle it moving forward. Now, for number 5, I have Fantastic Four number 49. And I mean, I love this book. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and it's the first cover appearance of Galactus and Silver Surfer, first full appearance of Galactus, and the second appearance of Silver Surfer. And most common grade, 5.0 with 311 blue labels on the census. Total census is 3,964 with 3,447 blue labels. So again, there's quite a few of them out there. This is a later book. The price in May of 2020 was $550. The price today is $1,900 for a 5.0. Now, on May 17th, there was a sale of $1,999. On May 14th, there was a sale of $2,025. But on June 13th, now this was an auction on eBay, so those tend to get a little bit lower, but there was a sale of $1,452. And so this is another one that it's gone up so much that it might be starting to pull back a little bit. We'll have to see. But regardless, that is a price increase of 245%. This is the biggest mover out there. Even at that low price, the low sale, that auction recently, it's still up 164% from last year. So just a huge gain in that book. And it's a great cover, awesome cover, great first appearance, extremely popular characters from one of the biggest trilogies in Marvel. So you can definitely see why that book and Fantastic Four 48 have gone up so much over the last year. Number 6, I've got Fantastic Four number 3. And the reason I have this one up here is that this is the first time you see the Fantastic Four in their well-known costumes, that the way that we all really picture them today. And it's a great cover with them on it. They're in the Fantastic Car. Just it's a great book. Now, the most common grade is a 4.0 with just 105 blue labels. Total census is just 1,174, with 973 being the blue label universal copies. So it is not a common book. There are not very many of them on the census. And the price in May of 2020 was $900 for that 4.0. That price today, $2,250. So that's a price increase of 150%. That's a big jump. Now, like I said, there aren't a lot of these books on the census, so it is difficult to price it. I had to make some estimates based on other sales to really get that price, but it's kind of what you have to do when you have books that don't sell as often, and this is definitely one of those. With so few books on the census, it just doesn't sell all that often. And right now, because people are really kind of speculating on it, I think a lot of people are holding it back too, so you just don't see it come up for sale often. All right, now number 7 on the list is another one of my favorite books from this run, and this is Fantastic Four number 12. And the reason I have this is it is the first Hulk crossover. It is the first meeting of the Fantastic Four with the Hulk. It's also the first time the Hulk battles the Thing, but it battles them as a team, not just one-on-one. So Fantastic Four 25, which is the book that Brian recommended, that one is the first time that it's the solo battle and the first time they're battling on the cover. Now, the most common grade in this is also a 4.0. There are 138 blue labels. The total census is 1,591 copies, with 1,367 being blue label copies. Now, the price in May of 2020 was $900. The current price is just $1,700. So that's an increase of only 90%. And so to me, that is a surprisingly low increase for a book that is this iconic, such an iconic cover, early Fantastic Four with really popular characters on it. So again, one that I would definitely be keeping an eye on. Now, number 8, I've got Fantastic Four number 4. And this is the first Silver Age appearance of the Submariner. And if you want his first appearance, you're going to have to go all the way back to Marvel Comics number 1 in 1939. Now, he did have another appearance in print, but this is his first appearance in comics. And so that's why really that book is hundreds of thousands, if not getting into the millions. So definitely not a book that most of us are going to be able to pick up. So first Silver Age appearance is a good alternative for that, because for that Marvel Comics number 1, a 6.0 sold for $280,500 on August 26th of last year, and a 9.4 sold for $1,260,000 in November of 2019. And given the current comic climate, I bet it would sell for a lot more than that right now. Now, going back to the Fantastic Four number 4, most common grade is a 4.0 with 112 blue labels. Total census is just 1,501 copies, with 1,195 being blue labels. So it is not a very common book. Now, the price in May of 2020 is pretty expensive. It was $1,950. It is now up to $4,300. And it is a difficult book to price as well because they just don't sell all that often. And honestly, it is probably quite a bit more than $4,300 right now because there haven't been any sales real recently, but we've had that announcement with Submariner that he will likely be the villain in the next Black Panther movie. And so all the other Submariner books have been spiking. This one, just because there aren't many out there, they haven't sold. So it's kind of difficult to guess what that book is really going to go for. There was a 9.0 that sold in the Heritage auction just a couple days ago, and I think it went for around $26,000. So it is a very expensive book. Now, the price increase for my current estimate on that book is 120%. Now, that's not all that much, especially for a character that's this important. So I do expect that book to go up quite a bit more, especially with these recent announcements. Now for number 9, this is where it starts getting a little more difficult. There's a lot of options with all the keys that there are in Fantastic Four, and I decided to go with Fantastic Four number 45. Now, this is the first appearance of the Inhumans, and they really got kind of crapped on after their failed TV show, but they are still a very important set of characters. And I think if the Eternals ends up being successful, there is the possibility that they could end up bringing these characters in as well, because they're relatively similar to the Eternals in kind of how they're perceived. And so I think that is a possibility, that if that ends up being a strong property, that we could see the Inhumans done again and maybe a little better. Now, the most common grade is a 5.0 with 247 blue labels. It's a little bit later book as well, so there are more copies out there. There's 2,996 on the census with 2,565 blue labels. Now, the price in May of 2020, just $220, so a very affordable book. The current price, $450, with a $456 sale on June 14th and a $402 sale on May 23rd. Now, that's a price increase of just 105%. And not everything is coming down in price. This one doesn't seem to be, so definitely one of those books to look for that hasn't moved up quite as much. So again, this is another one that I would probably be keeping an eye on right now. Number 10. This is actually the book that I recommended in my video with Bry's Comics, and this is Fantastic Four number 67. And it's the first cameo appearance of him. It is the most important book for this character in this run. Now, I think there are other books that are more important for him, like Thor 165 and Marvel Premiere number 1, but in the Fantastic Four run, this is the most important book for him. And those other two books are up a lot. Thor 165 is up 125%. Marvel Premiere number 1 is up 300% in the last year. So this one, when you see what this one is, you'll see why I definitely recommended it. So the most common grade for this book is a 7.5. There are 252 blue labels on the census, with a total census count of 2,740, with 2,563 total copies that are universal copies. Now, the price in May of 2020 was $350 for that 7.5. The current price, $550. Now, there are no recent sales in this exact grade, but a 6.0 sold for $400 on June 10th, and a 5.0 sold for $325 on June 10th as well. So that's where I was coming up with my estimate for this. And that's a price increase of just 60%. And now, when I talked about this with Brian, I had an estimated price of $500, but there have been a couple sales, that 6.0 and 5.0 since then, that are a little bit higher, so I boosted the price about $50. But still, it's just up 60%. It is extremely undervalued, especially when you're talking about a character that was teased at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy number 2. I mean, we know this character is coming, and this is a character that in the Marvel cosmic universe plays a huge role. So we could definitely see this being a big time character in the future in the MCU. So I would be picking up this book. I think it is a great option to pick up right now with how undervalued it really is. Now, I did decide to include a bonus book in this one as well, an 11th book, and this is Fantastic Four number 2. Now, the reason I didn't originally include it is that Skrulls are generally kind of a villain in the Marvel universe, and so wasn't really recommending a villain here. Now, Doctor Doom is another story. He is on another level of all the other villains, so there was no question including him. But with the Skrulls, I was a little more on the fence with it. Now, it is Fantastic Four number 2. It is also the second appearance of the Fantastic Four, so there are other things going for this book, but the Skrulls have been such a big part of the MCU recently that I think it's something that we do have to talk about and look at the prices of those books. Now, it is an expensive book. I mean, it's Fantastic Four number 2. The most common grade is a 4.0 with 112 blue labels, and the total census is just 1,286, and 1,031 of those are blue label copies. So I think one thing that's interesting with that is there are actually more copies of this than Fantastic Four number 3. So that shows how rare, uncommon Fantastic Four number 3 really is out there. But May 2020, this was a $1,700 book in a 4.0. Current price is about $3,300. Now again, there are not a lot of sales for this book, but it did have a $3,301 sale on May 10th. So that's where I'm getting that estimate from. But that's a price increase of just 95%. Again, not a huge price increase for that book, but it is a group of characters that are generally thought to be villains, so it's something that you may want to be a little cautious with. Now, like I've done with my other videos, I'm going to plug a little figure up here, and this is all 11 of those books with the grades that I looked at, as well as the current prices and the prices from a year ago and the percent changes. So if you want to see all those together, kind of for comparison, just, that's where all of those are. But now the thing that I also did was I ordered them. But the thing that I also did is I ordered them with the lowest percent increase on the top and the largest increase on the bottom. And so I've got another figure with that. I'm going to now throw up here. And in this figure, you can see that I have highlighted the rows that I think are the books that are the ones you should maybe be looking at trying to pick up right now. Now, you can see that I've got a very large price range on the books that I'm recommending, but first one is the one that I recommended in the video I did with Brian, and that is Fantastic Four number 67, up only 60% in the last year. And so to me, for such a big character, for their first cameo appearance, it's just a book you've got to pick up. I think it is just one of those most undervalued books out there right now. Now, number 2 on the list, it is not a cheap book, but this is Fantastic Four number 1, and I normally haven't been recommending these extremely expensive books, but this one really jumped out at me because X-Men number 1 has gone up like 200 to 300%. Amazing Fantasy 15 has gone up well over 100%, I think around 150% now. Amazing Spider-Man number 1, same, up around the same amount. All these other big Silver Age keys have been seeing a lot of growth. And this one, which is arguably one of the most important books for Marvel from the Silver Age, has only gone up 80%. And so in comparison, it is really underperforming right now. And this is the one that actually has a movie coming. We know a movie's coming. There's nothing known for the X-Men. And so if you have the financial means to pick up a Fantastic Four number 1 right now, it's definitely one of the books that I would be looking at. Now, number 3 is Fantastic Four number 12. This is also a pretty expensive book, so I've got, like I said, kind of a wide range of books depending on what your price point is with these, and you can get copies of it for under $1,000 in the lower grades, so it is something that is reachable there, but you're generally going to be spending over $1,000. But again, for a book that is as iconic as that, so important for kind of like a battle that happens over and over in the Marvel Universe, it just felt like only being up 90% was just not enough for that book. It is just, I think it's really underperforming compared to some of those other big battle covers like FF25, and so I would be trying to pick up copies of that book as well. And I do have a copy of it. I love that book, and I would really be recommending trying to go after that one as well. Now, the last one I have here that I'm recommending is Fantastic Four number 45, and that is that first appearance of the Inhumans. And again, this is one that can be very achievable. It's not an overly expensive book right now. You can see that it's only up 105%, which obviously is a lot in the world of comics, 105% in a year, but compared to all these other books, it is really underperforming. So that's the last book, the fourth book that I would really recommend going after right now. Now, all those other books, still great books. You know, if you want to go after those, pick those books up, I recommend it. There's nothing wrong with picking up any of these top Fantastic Four books, but those are the four that I see right now that seem the most undervalued, and so they're the ones that I would be trying to pick up right now if you have the means to, depending on, you know, the price point of those different books. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got other videos over here if you'd like to watch those, and the subscription button right here if you'd like to subscribe to the channel. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.